The lake looked soft and blue in the early morning light when Daniel first rolled open the workshop door. He stood for a moment, taking in the slow ripples against the reeds and the way the mist hovered just above the water. Birds called from the pines. The air smelled clean with a hint of sawdust from the day before. Daniel had moved here to find quiet, to work without traffic noise and office gossip. As an IT consultant, he spent long hours on calls with clients from different time zones. He needed a space that was close to the house but separate enough to help his mind switch into work mode. So he planned a small detached office, a single room with a big window facing the lake, a simple desk, and built-in shelves for his equipment. He did everything the right way. He spoke with the county office. He paid the fees. He printed the permit and put it inside a clear sleeve by the door, the way the inspector told him to. On the day the inspector came, the sun was bright and the lawn smelled like cut grass. The inspector checked the foundation, the wiring, and the fire-safe insulation. He noted the grounding, the outlet heights, and the smoke detector placement. He nodded as he ticked boxes on his digital tablet. "All looks good," the inspector said, polite and firm. "I'll file this today." He left, and Daniel felt a soft relief settle in his chest. He was not trying to do anything fancy. It was just a small office, painted a gentle gray to match the main house with a door that faced the gravel path. He imagined the next weeks: finish the shelves, set up the ergonomic chair, hang a corkboard, and start each morning with coffee, by the water before logging in. Neighbors had waved at him during those first weeks. An older couple from across the road walked their dog past his gate and smiled. "You're the new guy? Looks nice," the man said. A young mother with a stroller pointed at the lake and told him about the geese that came in the winter. People seemed friendly, and the area felt peaceful. This was what he had hoped for: a quiet lake ranch, honest work, and a respectful distance between homes where everyone appreciated calm. The first sign of trouble came on a warm afternoon when a white SUV rolled to a stop near his driveway. A woman stepped out, smartly dressed, with a file folder tucked under her arm. She introduced herself as Karen, the president of the HOA. Her smile was polite but tight, the kind of smile that did not reach the eyes. "Welcome to our community," she said. "We value harmony, safety, and the look of our streets." She glanced toward the new office, slow and careful. "What is this structure?" Daniel explained in clear words that it was an accessory building, a small office for his consulting work. He felt calm because he had done everything correctly. He had a permit, a past inspection, and a design that matched the main house. He showed her the printed permit in the sleeve by the door. Karen listened, nodding in short, slow motions. Then she said, "Our covenants are very clear. No external business structures." Her voice was still polite, but it had become firm, like a sign placed at a height you cannot miss. "We will need this demolished within 14 days. She handed him a paper with a notice of violation stamp across the top. The paper looked official, but he noticed it did not list any specific covenant number. It mentioned community, character, and aesthetic standards in broad terms. Daniel felt a small twist in his stomach, but he kept his voice steady. He said he would check the HOA covenants and follow the proper process. He reminded himself to breathe. After she left, he took the paper inside and sat at the kitchen table. He opened the HOA documents on his laptop and searched for the sections on accessory buildings. The words were long and a little dull, but he read them slowly until he understood. The covenants said that small accessory buildings were allowed if approved by the Architectural Review Committee, also called the ARC. They had to match the primary home in color and design. They had to respect setback rules and height limits. He had followed those details already. He had also emailed the ARC before starting, asking for guidance. He had not heard a clear no. He had received a reply thanking him for the drawings and saying the county permit would be important. He searched his email and made a special folder called HOA ARC. In the folder, he put every message he had sent and received. He printed the key emails and placed them in a binder. He also printed the specific covenant sections that allowed accessory buildings. He highlighted the lines that matched his situation. He tried to think like his clients at work, prepare, organize, and act calmly. That night, while the lake reflected the moon, he wrote a simple timeline on a notepad. It showed the date he bought the property, the date he first wrote to the ARC, the date of the county permit, and the date the structure passed inspection. He added the date of Karen's visit and her notice. The next afternoon, a neighbor named Luis stopped by with a bag of lemons from his tree. He had kind eyes and a relaxed way of speaking. He had lived there for 10 years, he said, and the HOA usually cared about lawns, parking, and big renovations. He looked at the office and shrugged. "It matches," he said. "Looks good, not hurting anyone." He told Daniel that the ARC usually met once a month and that people sometimes got mixed messages if the board and the ARC were not on the same page. "Best thing is to show your papers and stay calm," Luis said. "Don't let it turn into a fight." 2 days later, a letter arrived from the HOA, again signed by Karen. It repeated the demand: remove the office within 14 days. It mentioned daily fines if he did not comply. It still did not cite the exact covenant number that applied. Daniel read it twice and then drafted a respectful reply. He included the covenant section numbers that allowed accessory buildings, a copy of his county permit, and a note about his earlier email to the ARC. He asked to be placed on the agenda for the next ARC meeting and offered to repaint the office to match the main house more closely if needed. He also mentioned that the structure was not a commercial storefront. It was a quiet, single-person office used during normal daylight hours with no added traffic or signage. He walked to the printer, pressed print, and watched the pages slide into the tray. He made 2 copies of everything and set them in labeled folders. For ARC, for HOA. He took a calm breath, as if he were about to present to a client. It helped. He reminded himself that the lake did not change because of a letter. The water still moved in soft lines. The breeze still rattled the reeds. He was not alone either. He had good neighbors, and he had the facts. That weekend, he did small, quiet improvements that he believed no one could object to. He painted the trim to match the house more closely. He raked the gravel path. He set a potted fern by the door. He did this not to please anyone in particular, but to show good faith. He wanted the office to look like it had always belonged there, like a thoughtful extension of his home. On Monday morning, Daniel emailed the ARC again and asked for confirmation of the meeting date. A member named Trina replied within an hour. She thanked him for the clear documents and said they could put him on the agenda for the following Tuesday evening at the community center. She asked him to bring printed copies for the committee. She also added a short note. "We appreciate homeowners who follow county guidelines. If adjustments are needed for harmony, they are usually small." Daniel read that line twice and felt a little hope grow inside him. It was a kind line and it sounded practical. Throughout that week, he noticed Karen's SUV pass by more than once. She did not stop. She slowed near the driveway, looked at the office, and then continued. It was not a pleasant feeling to be watched, but Daniel kept to his routine. He worked. He took calls. He stepped outside for breaks, and he checked off small tasks. He did not want conflict. He wanted clarity. On the day before the ARC meeting, he created one more safety step. He placed a small memo board near the office door with a clear pocket that held the permit copy. He labeled it Permit and Inspection. He also set up cloud backups for all his files and made a shared link for the ARC. If anyone asked, he could send it right away. These steps made him feel steady. He did not rush. He did not raise his voice. He prepared. He trusted that a fair process would help good people make a good decision. Tuesday evening came with a soft sunset. The sky turned gentle shades of pink and gold over the lake. Daniel put on a clean shirt and placed his folders into a simple black bag. He arrived at the community center a few minutes early. The room had folding chairs and a long table at the front. A sign said, "RC meeting, welcome." A few neighbors were there, talking quietly. Trina, A woman with a warm smile and a notebook, full of careful handwriting, greeted him and showed him where to sit. She thanked him again for bringing printed copies. Karen entered a few minutes later, her heels clicking on the tile floor. She sat near the front with her folder and a tablet. Daniel nodded to her, polite and calm. He felt a quick beat in his chest, but he kept his breathing slow. When the meeting began, Trina explained the order of the agenda. There were 3 small items about paint colors and a fence repair. Then, his item. Daniel stood, greeted the committee, and thanked them for their time. He spoke in simple words. He said he was new to the community and wanted to follow both county rules and HOA rules. He explained the size of the office and showed the permit, the inspection sign-off, and the photo of the structure. The next morning after the ARC meeting, Daniel woke early and stood by the kitchen window with a warm mug of tea. The lake was quiet and pale, like a calm sheet of glass. He felt a little lighter because the committee had listened and asked fair questions. He had promised to match the trim and door exactly, and he was ready to do it that very day. Still, he knew he had to be careful. A process was never finished until it was written down, signed, and sent. So he opened his laptop, made a new folder labeled ARC Decision Pending, and placed scans of every paper he had shared at the meeting inside it. He saved a backup to a cloud drive and a USB stick. He also wrote a short note in his timeline, waiting for ARC letter, trim repaint today. By mid-morning, he put on old clothes and brought out the paint cans. He moved slowly and neatly, brushing the door with long, even strokes. The color now matched the main house perfectly. As he worked, he heard tires on gravel and looked up. Karen's white SUV rolled past slowly, and he could feel her eyes on the small office. She did not stop. She did not wave. She only drove by, and then turned down the lane toward the main road. Daniel breathed in, breathed out, and kept painting. He reminded himself that he had nothing to hide. He had a permit. He had passed an inspection. He had a respectful attitude and a clear plan. Before lunch, he checked his email. There was a message from Trina at the ARC. She thanked him for attending and for his calm presentation. She wrote that the committee would send a written decision within 5 business days and that the new paint would help with community harmony. Daniel smiled a small smile. He replied with a simple, "Thank you," and attached 2 photos showing the fresh paint, just to be helpful. That afternoon, a new letter arrived in his mailbox from the HOA, again signed by Karen. It said the structure must be removed in 14 days. It also listed a daily fine if he did not comply. The letter did not name the covenant section that applied. It used general words about community character. Daniel placed the letter on the table, took a photo of it for his records, and then wrote a polite reply. He included the same covenant text he had shared before and the photos of the new paint. He asked again to wait for the ARC's written decision. Since they had the authority to approve accessory buildings, he sent the reply by email and also printed it. He decided to send the print by certified mail so there would be a tracking record. In the late afternoon, while he was typing notes for a client, he heard another car slow down near the gate. He did not think much of it because people often drove near the lake to enjoy the view. But 10 minutes later, he heard firm footsteps on the gravel and a steady knock on his front door. He opened it and saw 2 police officers in crisp uniforms. Their faces were calm and professional. One said, "Good afternoon, sir. We received a 911 call about a possibly unsafe structure and ongoing construction activity. Do you mind if we talk with you?" Daniel felt his stomach tighten, not from guilt but from surprise. He opened the door wide and kept his hands visible. "Of course," he said in a steady voice. "I have a county permit and an inspection sign-off. The structure is finished and safe." He led them along the path to the small office. On the wall by the door, in a clear sleeve, the permit and inspection report were visible. He pointed to them and then showed the printed copies on his clipboard. He also explained that he was waiting for the ARC's written decision about paint and design harmony. The officers read the permit, nodded, and walked slowly around the office. They did not touch anything. They looked at the door, the windows, and the trimmed path. One officer asked, "Are you running a storefront here?" Daniel answered, "No, it's a home office for my consulting work. No signs, no visitors, and normal hours only." The officer wrote a few notes, then he said, "Thank you for your cooperation. Based on what we see and what you've shown, there is no emergency. We'll log this as a call for service with no action required." He gave Daniel a small card with his name and the incident number. "If you have any concerns," the officer added, "call the non-emergency line and reference this number." Daniel thanked them for their time. He asked kindly, "May I take a photo of your cards with the incident number for my records?" The officers agreed. He took the photo and saved it. As they left, he felt a quiet wave of relief. But he also understood that something had changed. A 911 call was serious. It was not a letter or an email. It brought police to his door. It placed his name in a log. He realized that he needed to protect himself and also protect the calm life he had come here to build. After the officers drove away, Daniel returned to his laptop and made a new section in his timeline. Police call. He typed the date, the time, the names on the cards, and the incident number. He added 2 photos of the permit in the clear sleeve and one of the fresh paint. He uploaded everything to the cloud and to his USB backup. Then he set up a folder for video clips from his security cameras. He pulled the footage from the hour before the officers arrived and saved it, in case someone later asked for proof of normal activity that day. He labeled it with the date and time. He also wrote a short, calm summary of his conversation with the officers and saved it as a PDF. Officers viewed permit and inspection. No violations observed, no action taken. That evening, he walked next door to thank his neighbor Luis for his earlier advice. Luis was trimming a hedge when Daniel came by. Daniel told him about the officer's visit and showed him the card with the incident number. Luis shook his head with a small, sad smile. "This kind of call makes everyone tense," he said. "I'm glad it ended calmly." He pointed to Daniel's office. "The new paint looks good, clean and steady. It blends in." They stood for a while, listening to the wind in the trees. Luis said, "If you ever need a witness about what I see day to day, quiet work, no visitors, I'm happy to write a statement." Daniel thanked him and felt grateful for that simple kindness. The next day, Daniel called the county building office just to be extra sure. He asked if they could send a short letter confirming that his structure matched the permit and had passed inspection. The clerk was helpful. She checked his file and said she could email a confirmation letter that afternoon. Daniel thanked her and waited. When the email arrived, he printed the letter and slid it into his binder. Now he had a county letter, the permit, the inspection report, and the ARC's appreciative email about the meeting. He felt like a careful bricklayer, stacking one clear fact on top of another, building a wall of truth that could not be pushed over by noise. Around noon, another email came from the HOA. It was brief and stern, repeating the demand and mentioning fines. Daniel replied with the county's confirmation letter attached. He wrote in simple words, "I am following the covenants in the ARC process. I request that any further concerns be directed to the ARC, as they are the approving body." He sent a copy to Trina, not to escalate but to keep the right people in the loop. In the afternoon, while geese glided across the lake like slow arrows, Daniel added one more safety step. He upgraded his camera system. He added a small doorbell camera at the front gate and adjusted the angle of the office camera to show the permit sleeve clearly. He tested the timestamps and the motion alerts. He made sure the clips saved automatically to the cloud. He did not plan to use the footage for anything unless truly needed. But it felt smart to have a clear record of normal life. A quiet lane, a small office, and a man doing his job. That evening, a different HOA board member named Evan wrote to Daniel privately. Evan said he had seen the permit and the inspection photos. He also said that sometimes the board and the ARC had different views, but that the ARC's written decisions were the official path for design and structures. Evan thanked Daniel for staying respectful and encouraged him to wait for the ARC letter. "Please keep all your records," Evan wrote. Clear facts help everyone. Daniel replied with a simple thank you. He did not share Evan's message with others. He only saved it in his folder. 2 days later, just after sunrise, a patrol car rolled slowly by the lane again. It did not stop. It moved along quietly, like a careful observer. Daniel took a breath and went outside to sweep the path. He did not want to live in worry. He wanted to live in clarity. He reminded himself that he had done everything right and that the system was designed to sort truth from confusion. He swept leaves into a gentle pile, listened to the birds, and kept his focus on small good tasks. In the afternoon, Daniel received a short call from a local detective who handled community complaints. The detective's voice was calm. He asked a few basic questions. Was the structure new? Did Daniel have a permit? Had there been any threats or conflicts? Daniel answered each question clearly and offered to email the permit, the inspection report, the county confirmation letter, and a short list of dates. The detective said yes, that would help. He gave Daniel an email address and asked him to include the police incident number in the subject line. Daniel sent the documents, then saved the sent email as a PDF for his records. That night, he sat at the table with his binder open and a pen in his hand. He checked his tabs. County, ARC, HOA letters, police, photos, videos. He felt like a librarian of his own small world, keeping things in order so the truth would be easy to find. The lake outside the week after the meeting moved slowly, but it did not feel empty. Daniel used the time to do small, steady things that showed good faith. Each morning he matched the trim with careful brush strokes and checked that the door color was perfect. He swept the path so gravel lay in a neat line and added 2 low shrubs by the side wall. The shrubs were small now, but he knew they would grow into a soft green edge that would make the office blend into the yard. He kept working his normal hours in the house, and during breaks he stepped out to the lake and let his eyes rest on the water. It helped him breathe. He had done what he could at the meeting. Now he had to wait for the written decision. On the 4th morning, a short email arrived from Trina with the subject line, RC Decision. Daniel's chest lifted. He opened it right away. The letter was simple and clear. The ARC approved his accessory building with small conditions. Match the trim and door to the main house. Already done. Add 2 shrubs by the office wall. Already planted. Keep normal daytime work hours. No signs. And store any work items inside. At night. The letter said the structure fit the design rules and was in harmony with the property when the conditions were met. Trina thanked him for his careful paperwork and respectful attitude. Daniel read the letter twice, then printed it and placed a copy in his binder under a new tab, ARC Approval. He sat at the kitchen table and let the relief wash over him. It was not loud joy. It was quiet and deep like a spring under the ground. He wrote an email to thank Trina and attached photos of the fresh paint and the shrubs. He wrote, "Conditions complete. Please let me know if anything else is needed." Then he sent a short note to Evan, the board member who had written to him privately. It said only, "The ARC approved it with conditions. Thank you for encouraging a calm process." He closed his laptop and went outside to look at the office. The gray paint looked soft under the morning light. The shrubs made a clean line, not flashy, just calm. He felt proud because he had followed the path step by step. That afternoon, a different kind of letter came in the mail. It was from the HOA, signed by Karen. It spoke in firm language and announced a special enforcement hearing to consider possible penalties for non-compliance with community standards. It gave a date the next week and said he must attend. It did not mention the ARC approval letter at all. It did not list any covenant numbers. It spoke in general lines about character and expectations. Daniel put the letter next to the ARC approval on the table. One page was calm and practical. The other was loud and vague. He did not feel angry. He felt a clear focus land on his shoulders. He would bring facts to the hearing the same way he had done at the ARC meeting. He opened the covenants again and searched for sections about home use. He found a part that spoke about home occupations that do not bring extra traffic, signs, or noise. He had none of those. He printed that section and highlighted it. Then he printed the ARC approval letter, the county permit, the inspection report, and the county's confirmation email. He added photos of the paint and shrubs. He made a one-page summary with dates and short notes. Permit issued. Inspection passed. ARC meeting held. RC approval with conditions. Conditions completed. He kept his words simple and polite. He wanted anyone to be able to read it quickly and understand the whole story. As he prepared, small moments showed him the neighborhood was watching in a kind way. A neighbor named Maria waved from her driveway and said, "I heard you spoke well at the meeting." She told him about how she once tried to put up a small treehouse for her kids, but the process had been confusing. "We need clearer rules," she said with a friendly shrug. Another neighbor, Mr. Patel, mentioned that he had to repaint his fence twice because he got 2 different instructions a year apart. He did not sound angry, just tired of mixed messages. Daniel listened and nodded. He did not make big statements. He just said, "Thank you for telling me," and he went back to his binder. The evening of the special enforcement hearing arrived with a gold sky. The lake looked like soft metal, smooth and quiet. Daniel wore a clean shirt and brought his black bag with labeled folders: permit, inspection, home use rules, ARC approval, photos, summary. The community center was fuller than the ARC meeting had been. Folding chairs lined the room and people stood along the walls. There was a soft buzz of talk, like the sound a hive makes when it is awake but not upset. At the front, the HOA board sat behind a table. Karen sat in the middle, her folder full of papers. Trina sat on the side with a stack of ARC documents. The board opened the meeting. Karen spoke first about community character and the risk of turning homes into work sites. She said they must set a firm example. Her voice was confident and her words were strong, but they did not point to a covenant number or a clear rule. A board member asked for the ARC's position. Trina raised the ARC letter. She read the approval and the conditions out loud. Her voice was calm and steady. When she finished, the room was quiet. People shifted in their seats the way people do when they understand something important. Karen said the ARC had acted without board guidance and that the board still had the right to enforce standards. Trina opened a thin booklet and read the part of the bylaws that gave the ARC authority to approve designs and accessory structures when conditions were met. She read slowly. She did not add extra words. She just read what the rules said. Daniel watched faces in the room change as the words landed. It was like watching fog lift from the lake. You did not notice each step, but then suddenly you could see the shore. When the floor opened for comments, a few neighbors stood. Maria spoke kindly. She said, "I want the neighborhood to look nice, but I also want fair steps we can all follow. If the ARC approves with conditions, that should mean the path is clear." Mr. Patel mentioned his fence paint story. A longtime resident, Yvonne, said she once got a letter about her flower boxes being too bright, but the next year was told to add more color. People did not sound upset. They sounded tired of confusion. They asked for clear words and one shared process. Daniel was called to speak. He stood and thanked the board and the ARC for their time. He used simple words. He explained his work, his quiet hours, and his lack of signs or visitors. He held up the permit and the inspection report. He read one line from the home use section about quiet work that does not change traffic or noise. He passed out copies of his one-page summary. He did not raise his voice. He did not point fingers. He told the story in steps, the same way he had lived it. Ask, follow, document, adjust. When he finished, a board member named Evan asked a direct question to Trina. "Is the structure approved with conditions met?" Trina answered, "Yes. The conditions are complete. It is in harmony." Evan looked at the room and then at Karen. He said in a careful voice, "I joined the board to help make fair rules, not to fight approved projects." He paused and took a breath. "I cannot sit on a hearing that ignores the ARC's authority and the clear steps we ask homeowners to take." He placed his board badge on the table and said, "I resign from the board effective now." I will continue to serve as a volunteer on policy cleanup if you allow it, but I won't be part of this hearing." The room let out the soft, surprised sound that groups make when something big and honest happens. For a few seconds, the air felt very still. Then hands started to clap, not loud or messy, but steady. It was not against anyone. It was for clarity. Karen tapped her folder and said the board would take a brief recess. The board members moved into a side room. People talked in low voices, and some came over to Daniel to pat his shoulder. He smiled, small and shy. He did not feel like a winner. He felt like a person who had shown his homework and been heard. When the board returned, Karen announced that the special enforcement hearing would be paused to allow the policy committee to review the overlap between board and ARC roles. She said fines would be held in abeyance while they reviewed. She thanked residents for their passion. Her words were formal, but the meaning was simple. The hearing would not go forward that night. The room exhaled. Trina handed Karen and the board copies of the ARC approval again, with the photos of the finished conditions. She also gave a short note recommending that design issues continue to flow through ARC with written conditions, so homeowners knew exactly what to do. After the meeting, Daniel thanked Trina in the hallway. The light above them hummed softly. Trina smiled and said, "Thank you for making it easy to say yes. Your documents were clear and your tone was kind." She told him she would email an extra copy of the ARC approval stamped final for his records. Evan shook Daniel's hand and said, "I'll help on the policy cleanup. We need one map, not two." His face looked both tired and free, like someone who had put down a heavy box. At home, Daniel placed the new pages in his binder and added a short line in his timeline. Hearing paused. ARC approval stands. Policy review coming. He sent a grateful email to Trina and Evan. Then he wrote a short, polite note to Karen, and the board asking them to confirm in writing that fines were paused and that the ARC approval was recognized while policies were reviewed. He did not challenge anyone. He simply asked for the record to be clear. The next morning, Trina's final ARC letter arrived in his inbox with, the pause after the hearing felt like a deep breath for the whole neighborhood, but Daniel knew calm can be thin when strong opinions still sit under the surface. He kept working, kept trimming bushes, kept saving emails and photos in his binder. He wanted to move forward as if the matter was done, but inside he stayed ready, like a steady hand on a ship's wheel even when the water looked smooth. 3 mornings later, the smooth water stirred. Daniel was on a video call with a client, in another time zone. His camera was on. His headset light glowed. Notes filled the shared screen. At 10:16 a.m., a chime sounded from the front gate camera. Motion detected. He ignored it for the moment because he was mid-sentence, explaining a fix for a server issue. He finished the call 20 minutes later and checked the alerts. The doorbell camera showed Karen at the mailbox by the road, talking on her phone and gesturing toward his property. She stayed for a few minutes, then left. Daniel saved the clip, labeled with date and time, and returned to his work. At noon, firm footsteps crunched the gravel. He opened his door and found 2 officers he had not met before. Their tone was polite and careful. "Sir," one said, "we're responding to a 911 call reporting a verbal threat made at the mailbox earlier today. We need to ask a few questions." The words felt like a drop into cool water, a quick shock more than pain. Daniel took a slow breath. He said, "You're welcome to ask. I was on a recorded video call at that time. My cameras may also help." He showed them his work desk and the call log. The red light on the webcam recording was still on because he records calls, with permission, for notes. The officers looked at the timestamps and nodded. They followed him to the doorbell camera screen. The video showed Karen speaking on her phone and pointing. The camera's clock matched the call log. "Do you have footage from other angles?" one officer asked. Daniel said, "My neighbor's doorbell camera faces the street. If they are willing, it might help." He called Luis. 10 minutes later, Luis walked over with his phone and a respectful smile. "You can use my clip," he said. The short video showed the quiet lane, Karen at the mailbox, and no one else present. The officer wrote down Luis's name, and saved the clip. The officers thanked Daniel and left with a measured, "We'll note there was no contact." When the gravel settled, Daniel felt the impact of what had happened. This was not a simple disagreement. A 911 call had claimed he threatened someone while he was on a video call. He did not feel angry. He felt protective of the peace on the lane, of the officer's time, and of any neighbor who might face the same thing without a camera or a calm witness. That afternoon, the detective who had emailed Daniel before called him again. His voice was careful but warmer now, like a person who has seen enough to speak plainly. "I reviewed the earlier call," he said, "and now this one. Your records are solid. Could you send me the new clips, the call log, and the names of any neighbors willing to give statements?" Daniel said yes. He added the 2 officer cards from the first visit, the incident numbers, the ARC approval letter, and the short timeline he had already built. He kept the email simple: facts, dates, links to the saved videos in a shared folder. He sent it, then saved the sent email as a PDF and added it to the binder. The next day, the detective asked to stop by. He wore plain clothes and a calm face. They sat at the kitchen table with the binder between them. The detective turned pages the way careful people do. No rush, no skipping. He paused at the ARC approval and the county confirmation letter. He paused at the video stills and incident numbers. He took notes and asked small, steady questions. "Any witnesses besides Luis? Any other board members contact you? Any past issues beyond HOA letters?" Daniel answered honestly and briefly. He did not add color. He did not make guesses. He let the papers speak. When the detective closed the binder, he looked up and chose his words. "Calling 911 is a serious tool," he said, "and it should only be used for real emergencies or real crimes. When people use it to press a personal dispute, it wastes time, pulls officers away from real needs, and creates unfair stress for the person who did nothing wrong. Our job is to check if these calls were made in good faith or if they crossed the line into a false report. Your documentation helps us tell the difference." Daniel listened with his hands folded. The detective continued, "I can't tell you what to do, but if this pattern continues, or if you want to address what already happened, one path is a sworn statement. It's a formal complaint where you affirm the facts and ask the court to consider charges for false reporting or harassment. If a judge agrees the facts show probable cause, the court can issue an arrest warrant or a summons. It's not about winning a fight. It's about protecting the integrity of the system and your peace." The room felt very quiet after those words. The lake outside the window moved in slow lines. Daniel thought about his father's advice again. Tie down what matters and stand steady. He did not want anyone to get into trouble. He also did not want 911 to be used as a lever against him or anyone else. He asked the detective, "If I sign a sworn statement, am I adding conflict to the neighborhood? Or am I helping set a boundary that keeps everyone safer?" The detective didn't rush. "It can feel like both in the short term," he said. "But boundaries are what let communities heal. Clear lines turn big storms into small rain. And your tone matters. A calm statement of facts without harsh words is helpful." That evening, Daniel walked the path by the water. The sunset painted the sky in soft colors that did not brag, just stayed gentle. He thought about the last weeks, the permits, the meeting, the hearing that paused, the second 911 call. He tried to imagine the future if he did nothing. Would more calls come? Would someone else face the same stress because they built a small shed or a playhouse? He turned these thoughts over like smooth stones in his pocket. By the time the first stars came out, his answer was clear. He would tell the truth in the most respectful way he could. He would sign a sworn complaint. The next morning, Daniel met the detective at the station. The room where they sat had a simple table, 2 chairs, and a neat stack of forms. The detective explained each part before they began. A statement of facts, a list of supporting documents, a section where Daniel affirmed that he believed the information was true. Daniel wrote in simple words, like a careful letter. He included dates, times, and the nature of each 911 call. He noted that officers arrived and found no emergency. He attached the call logs, the video clips, the incident numbers, and the ARC and county documents that showed he was in compliance. He avoided sharp adjectives. He stuck to what happened. At the end, he signed and dated the form. His signature was steady. The detective notarized it and placed it in a folder with his report. "We'll submit this to the court for review," the detective said. "A judge will decide if there's probable cause for charges. If so, the court may issue an arrest warrant or a summons. You'll receive a copy of whatever the court chooses." Daniel nodded and thanked him. He did not feel triumph. He felt a quiet, careful relief, as if a load he had carried had finally been placed on the right shelf. 2 days later, while Daniel was adjusting the shelves in his office, his phone buzzed. It was an email from the detective. "Judge found probable cause. Warrant issued for misuse of emergency services and related conduct. We will proceed according to department policy." The words were brief and exact. Daniel read them once, then again, then placed the phone down. He stood by the window, watching a small ripple move across the lake. He thought about fairness. He thought about how boundaries do not punish, they teach. He whispered a simple hope into the quiet room. "Let this help our street be calm again." News travels along a lake road the way wind carries across water. Later that day, neighbors walked by and nodded with kind eyes. No one cheered. No one gloated. A few left short notes on Daniel's doorstep. "Thank you for handling this the right way. We appreciate your calm. Rules should be clear for everyone." He put the notes in his binder, not because he needed praise, but because they were part of the record of a community learning to breathe again. The following morning, a patrol car parked quietly near the corner for a short time, while officers handled their official tasks. There were no raised voices, no messy scenes. The process was handled with dignity. Daniel stayed inside and made tea. He remembered the first day he opened his office door to the lake air and thought of all the small steps that had brought him here. None of those steps were loud. Each step was careful, and together they added up to a path. That afternoon, the HOA board secretary sent a community email about policy updates. It did not mention names. It said the policy committee would review the overlap between board and ARC roles and propose a clear shared process for accessory buildings, paint, and home use. It encouraged neighbors to attend a listening session the next week. The email also included a gentle line: "Please use community channels for non-emergency concerns. Remember, 911 is for emergencies. Respect for each other helps keep our neighborhood safe and calm." Daniel read those words and felt a soft, grateful lightness in his chest. Louise stopped by with fresh lemons and a recipe for lemon tea. "I heard there's movement," he said gently. Daniel nodded and said, "The court looked at the facts." Louise looked out over the water and said, "That's..." Morning light lay quiet on the lake when Daniel opened his office door and let in the soft air. The room smelled like fresh wood and tea. He checked his planner, answered a few client emails, and watered the 2 small shrubs that he had planted beside the wall. He did not look for news. He did not wait by the window. He tried to live like any normal day because calm is also a practice. Late in the morning, a patrol car rolled slowly to the corner. 2 officers stepped out, spoke in low voices, and handled their work with careful dignity. There were no raised voices. There was no scene. A process had been set in motion days before, and now the system walked its steady steps. Daniel stayed, inside. He made tea and breathed. He thought of fairness as something gentle, like a straight line drawn with a soft pencil, firm but not harsh. By early afternoon, an email arrived from the HOA board secretary. It announced an emergency community meeting that evening to discuss leadership roles, policy clarity, and community trust. It did not give names. It did not tell stories. It gave an agenda and invited respectful voices. Daniel read the message twice. He knew there would be feelings in the room, and that people would look to him, but he decided he would only speak, if asked. He would bring his binder, but he would try mostly to listen. He put the email into his folder and wrote a simple line in his timeline: emergency meeting, policy, and trust. The meeting room was crowded when he arrived. Folding chairs filled every row and neighbors stood along the walls. The hum of quiet talk filled the space, not angry, just full. At the front table, the board secretary called the meeting to order. She explained that the board had asked the vice president to serve as acting chair, while the president addressed a private legal matter outside the HOA. The room stayed polite and still. Then the acting chair outlined 3 items. First, a motion to suspend the president from duties until the legal process concluded. Second, the formation of an interim policy committee to review and clarify the roles of the ARC and the board. Third, a short list of immediate steps to rebuild trust. Trina, the ARC lead, stood to speak. She held the ARC handbook in one hand and a few printed pages in the other. She explained in simple words what the ARC approved and why: size, color, placement, and harmony with the home. She said the ARC worked from written rules to help everyone follow the same map. She did not talk about any person. She talked about process. Then she lifted a single page titled Temporary Guidance and read it out. All accessory building questions would go first to the ARC. Any conditions set by the ARC would be written, specific, and practical. The board would not open a separate enforcement action while ARC conditions were in progress. People nodded. The words felt like a door clicking softly into place. Voices from the chairs rose in calm lines. Maria spoke about wanting a neighborhood that looks neat, but also feels fair. She suggested a simple checklist for any project. What to submit, to whom, and in what order. Mr. Patel told the room about repainting his fence twice in 1 year because of mixed messages. He asked for one email address that copies both the board and the ARC, so no one gets off track. Yvonne, who had lived there the longest, asked for a regular office hour once a month where residents can ask small questions before small questions turn into large worries. A young father asked for a promise that 911 would not be used for community disagreements. He said, "When lights flash on our street, children look out the window. Let those lights be for real emergencies only." The room murmured with gentle approval. The acting chair called for the vote. Hands went up in quiet lines. The motion to suspend the president passed by a wide margin. The policy committee was formed on the spot. Trina would help lead, Evan would serve as acting board representative, and 3 residents, Maria, Mr. Patel, and Yvonne, joined as members. The committee's task was simple. In 30 days, bring back a clear map that any new homeowner could follow. The chair also read a short, immediate resolution. While policies are reviewed, ARC approvals with written conditions are recognized as the controlling guidance for design and accessory structures. Soft, steady clapping followed. No cheering, no gloating, just the sound of a group agreeing to walk together. People came to Daniel afterward. Some shook his hand. Some only touched his arm. "Thank you for staying calm," one neighbor said. "You reminded us that paper and patience matter." Daniel answered the same way each time. "The process helped us all, it wasn't just me." He did not stay long. He went home along the quiet curve of the lake road and set his binder on the kitchen table. He added a new page for emergency, meeting, notes and outcomes, and wrote a few lines about the votes, the committee, and the temporary resolution. Then he turned off the kitchen light and stood at the window. The lake held the moon like a cup holds water. The next days felt like the sound of a soft broom on a porch, small motions that make a place feel right again. Daniel finished his shelves, sanded the edges smooth, and lined up his reference books. He ran cable management under his desk so no wires showed. He placed the ARC approval, stamped final, in a simple frame on the office wall, a reminder that calm steps had meaning. He did not frame it to boast. He framed it to teach his own heart that patience is not invisible. It leaves marks you can see. Luis dropped by with a bag of lemons and a story about his first year in the neighborhood. They fixed a loose picket on the fence together. Maria's kids left a drawing at Daniel's door with a big silver crayon lake, a tiny gray office, and the words, "Thank you for being nice." He put their art in a plastic sleeve inside the binder. These small things meant something. Kindness was returning to the lane. One afternoon, the detective returned Daniel's spare USB drive and a printed copy of the receipt for the evidence file. He did not discuss the legal case, as is proper, but he thanked Daniel for clear records and a steady voice. "The best calls," he said gently, "are the ones we never have to take because a community handles its own questions in the right way." He reminded Daniel, and through him any neighbor who might ask, that the non-emergency line is the correct channel for HOAs or disputes. Daniel nodded and thanked him for his careful work. After the detective left, Daniel slid the receipt into the police tab and wrote a new line in the timeline. Evidence receipt returned. Reminder, use non-emergency channels. The policy committee moved quickly. Within 2 weeks, a new welcome guide draft appeared in neighbors' inboxes. It used simple language and large headings. It listed the 3 steps for projects. 1. Send plans to the ARC email. 2. Wait for written conditions. 3. Complete conditions and send a photo for final note. It printed the exact covenant numbers and the plain English version next to them. It included a bright box labeled Where to Ask with one shared email, address that reached both ARC and board. It added a soft line about communication. Kind words carry farther. It also offered 2 standing office hours each month, one run by the ARC for design questions and one by the board for general issues. Finally, it closed with a simple reminder box. 911. Emergencies. For disputes, use the non-emergency line or HOA email. At the listening session that followed, residents brought small questions and a few old worries. A family asked about putting up a playhouse. The ARC gave clear measurements and a color guide, and the family smiled. A couple asked about adding a small garden shed. Trina explained setback lines and they left with a checklist. Evan said he would push for annual board training on conflict de-escalation and fair process. He also proposed a cooling off rule. No enforcement letters may go out within 48 hours of a public dispute. Instead, a phone call or office hour must come first. People nodded. It felt like the community was building good habits, as if the neighborhood itself had a binder now. Labeled, clear, and kind. Life by the lake warmed into a steady rhythm. On a Saturday, neighbors joined for a small, clean and green day. They trimmed the community path, painted 2 benches by the water, and shared snacks at folding tables. Daniel brought lemonade in a big glass pitcher and a tray of simple cookies. He worked next to Mr. Patel, setting new numbers on the old notice board. Yvonne told stories about the first summer she lived there when the road was still gravel all the way around. Even the little things told a bigger story. The neighborhood was turning toward each other again. About the legal matter, people were careful. No one told rumors at the picnic tables. No one used names in public updates. Daniel did not speak about anyone's situation because he believed due process works best in quiet. He hoped for something good, not a win or a loss, but learning. He hoped the person at the center would find steadiness, just as the street had found steadiness. He kept his heart soft toward that idea. Boundaries can be strong without being cold. On a calm weekday morning, Daniel printed his final to-do list for the office. He installed a soft rug under his chair, placed 2 framed photos of his parents on the shelf, and set a small plant on the windowsill. Then he took down the binder from its place by the door and opened it. The tabs made a satisfying rainbow of order, county, ARC, HOA letters, police, photos, videos, community. He added 1 more sheet to the last tab. Community Day, thanks to everyone. He smiled. The binder would stay on the shelf, useful, but no longer heavy. He closed it and felt the quiet joy of finished woe.